Welcome back to Visions of Life 2 Author Artist Series. Today we have James Flanigan, whose short story Elvis Has Left the Building was inspired by Eric Semelroth's pastel painting Imitation a la King, which was featured in Art Scene Chicago 2000. Jim, I'll start with you. What made you choose Eric's painting for your story?
Well, first, thank you very much, Ivy, for inviting us tonight. And it's a pleasure to chat about Eric's wonderful painting and my attempt at a humorous short story. I'm not a big one for portraits, but Eric's picture just kind of spoke to me. I could tell from the title of the portrait that it wasn't supposed to be Elvis. It was supposed to be an Elvis impersonator. But there were so many little nuances to the painting that it just kind of drew me in, and it made me want to tell a story about the picture. And you could also tell that it's kind of an aging Elvis impersonator. And there's the trademark Elvis sneer, but my mind can imagine, well, what happens to Elvis impersonators once they get past the age of Elvis? Elvis died young. What happens when they start showing gray, when they start showing a whole lot of lines on their faces? You know, maybe Elvis was a little bit larger at the end of his life. And that led me to a story about something we all do, and that's making decisions in life and coming to crossroads and to explore a little bit of the process behind some of those decisions. In the story, my Elvis impersonator has a friend who assisted in the decision-making process. I'd like to think he assisted in a humorous fashion, and that gives the reader some chuckles along the way. I've been in that Elvis impersonator's shoes so many times, and how important it is to have support in making those decisions.
I wonder if that humor came naturally with you, or it's something that developed over time.
I like to surround myself with people who laugh and who enjoy life. In fact, all the stories I've written, they're all of a humorous nature.
Like your latest short story anthology on
Sure.
Afterlife, is that something that you believe in, or were you just poking fun of afterlife?
I know there's some people that have very strong feelings about what their afterlife is going to be. They know for sure. I don't. It's not for lack of faith. It's just because I don't think we're supposed to know necessarily. It's just something with me that I like to think about all the possibility. After you provided me great encouragement by publishing my story, I went off on a writing spree, and I ended up with about 18 stories, 16 of which I published in my book called Beyond Tales of the Afterlife. It's available only in digital format on Amazon.
Eric,
Yes, Ivy.
what did you think of Jim's story based on your painting?
I liked it very much. It did make me laugh, and I liked the relationship between the two characters in the story. And I'm so glad that my portrait spoke to Jim, and that he was able to riff on that and make it something else.
Is there anything else you want to tell us about that painting?
You know, when you look at it, it's clearly an attempt to be Elvis. I did a few of these portraits of imitators and one of Santa Claus, and those portraits are really about imitation itself. When you talk about representational art, I think you have to talk about imitation, and there's a source and then a copy of that source. Here's this guy who's representing Elvis, so he's a copy, and then I am imitating that. I'm representing that. So there you have these layers of representation. We're both the same in a way.
I find the actual person fascinating.
I was working at a newspaper at the time, and so one of the reporters mentioned this Elvis impersonator. This guy had legally changed his name to Elvis Presley. So, you know, I'm on the phone, and is Elvis there? I took photos of him. I guess he traveled around a little bit, you know, to do his act. Later in his life, you know, he gave up the music shop. He went up to Wisconsin and became a mayor of some small town up there. It's great that he doesn't look so much like Elvis. I think that's that's more interesting than if he, you know, was spot on. I just think that way it toggles between his identity and who he's trying to portray.
Now, Eric, we can look at another painting that is also an impersonator. How did you find this person?
Through the newspaper as well. This I call the great emancipator impersonator. I was photographing him and I thought, okay, now I'm Matthew Brady photographing Abraham Lincoln. So there's even that imitation. To me, it's about imitators.
Now, Jim, does any story come into mind when you see that painting? Could you wrap a humorous story around a well-known historic figure?
I'm not so sure about that. And it always fascinates me when I find people that are impersonators, but don't necessarily resemble that person they're impersonating all that much.
Now, I have another one of Eric's painting.
This one I included just because, Jim, one of the two characters is a boxer in your story. And,
Right.
and this is Leon Spinks, former heavyweight champion of the world. I had the privilege of doing his portrait. This one's called Prize Fighter. My next door neighbor at the time was a minister. Well, Leon got into some trouble and he had to do some community service. So the minister was in charge of that. The minister approached me and said, hey, how'd you like to do a portrait of Leon Spinks? How do you pass that up, right? He was in the basement and it was just the two of us. And it was quite awkward at first. The one you see, the portrait was done from the first photograph because there was the most tension in the room and it just looked like, please don't hurt me.
That's a powerful painting.
So, Jim, when you see this portrait, what do you think of if you were writing a story about it, which you have to be very careful about being humorous around a subject that has race as part of the character?
Right. Exactly. You know, when I see that picture, the first thing that comes to mind is power. So I don't necessarily look at the color there of his skin. I just see that power coming out of that picture. That's what I would write about, possibly about being able to control that power and put it to use in a positive way. As we all know, power can be abused and power can be scary.
Did you give him your painting?
I did give him a reproduction, which is another copy.
Thank you, Jim and Eric, for sharing with us. You can go to crowwoodspublishing.com to get a copy of the book, Visions of Life 2, and you can also get it on Amazon. So I'll see you next time.